A little over a year ago, I had walked out of a doctor's office, sat in my car, and was overcome with emotion. See, a few weeks earlier, I had just buried my mother. Now, I was being told I had advanced liver disease, not a fatty liver, not something to keep an eye on. Advanced liver disease, stage 3. And according to the nurse practitioner who read me the results, I was dangerously close to stage 4. The stage isn't considered reversible. I remembered sitting there thinking one question: how much time do I have? Today, I want to tell you a story about 4 different opinions that had 4 different answers. Not because I want to talk about liver disease, not because I want to give medical advice, and certainly not because I think doctors are bad at what they do. Quite the opposite. The lesson I learned had very little to do with my liver. It had everything to do with what happens when people you're trusting don't agree. Because sooner or later, every one of us is going to go find ourselves in that position. A doctor, a financial advisor, a boss, an attorney, a pastor. Someone with credentials, experience, and authority is going to tell you something important. And then someone equally qualified is going to tell you something completely different. When that happens, what do? That's what this story is really about. For years, my primary care physician had told me I had a fatty liver. Nothing dramatic, but something that showed up because I was overweight. Something that a lot of Americans today have. See, every year we talk about it. Every year I tell myself I needed to lose weight. And every year, life would get busy. Then my mother got sick. Watching someone you love go through serious health issues changes the way that you think about your own mortality. Things felt distant suddenly, and then they felt personal. Things you plan to deal with someday start feeling a lot more urgent. And after my mom passed away, I decided it was time to stop wondering about my liver and actually find out where I stood. So I scheduled an appointment with my gastroenterologist. They performed what's called a FibroScan. For those who aren't familiar with it, it's a non-invasive test that measures stiffness in the liver. Generally speaking, more stiffness can indicate more fibrosis. More fibrosis can indicate advanced liver disease. I wasn't particularly worried. I expected them to tell me that I needed to lose weight, eat better, exercise more. The things most of us already know that we should be doing. But instead, the nurse practitioner explained that my results suggested advanced stage 3 liver fibrosis. She told me I was approaching stage 4, and she wanted to begin medication called Resdifra immediately. Now, if you've ever been through something like this, it's hard to explain what happens in your mind. You hear the diagnosis, then your brain starts filling in the blanks. You think about your future, your spouse, your plans, your retirement, your children and your grandchildren. You start searching for answers for questions that you never thought you'd be asking. And in my case, I just watched my mother go through her own health issues with the same disease. So imagination wasn't helping me. I remember driving home. I remember sitting in the car. And I remember being overwhelmed by that possibility that my future just changed. So when I called my wife, her reaction surprised me. She wasn't dismissive. She wasn't unconcerned, but she wasn't convinced either. See, she spent years working in the medical field, and her response was simple: we need more information. At the time, I didn't know whether that was wisdom or denial. Maybe it was a little of both. But she wasn't ready to declare the case closed based on a single test. So when I got home, I did what I always do when something important lands in my lap. I started researching. And when I say researching, I mean obsessively. Medical journals, liver disease resources, FibroScan interpretation, blood work markers, clinical studies, anything I could get my hands on. Now, here's where things started getting interesting. The more I researched, the less everything seemed to fit together. This FibroScan, it said one thing, but my blood work didn't seem to support what I was reading about advanced liver disease. I wasn't looking for someone to tell me that I was fine. I wasn't trying to prove the doctors wrong. I wasn't trying to understand why pieces didn't seem to fit. Because if you tell me I have advanced liver disease, I'm going to believe you. But I'm also going to want the evidence to make sense. The more questions I asked, the more convinced that I became that I needed another opinion. Not because I distrusted my gastroenterologist, in fact, the opposite. This was the same physician who had been very good to my mother during her illness. The same physician who helped my wife when another doctor wasn't willing to act. I wasn't angry, not yet at least, but I was confused. And confusion is usually a sign that you need more information. So I asked for a referral to a hepatologist, a liver specialist, someone whose entire practice revolved around this one organ. If I truly had stage 3 liver disease, I wanted the best information that I could get. And if I didn't, I wanted to know that too. See, a few weeks later, I found myself sitting in the office of the hepatology practice. They reviewed my records, they reviewed the fiber scan, and they told me something that I wasn't expecting. They would never have accepted the original result as definitive. The quality measure on that test wasn't where they wanted it to be. Specifically, they were concerned about something called IQR, a technical measurement that's used to evaluate the reliability of the scan. So in simple terms, they were telling me that before they diagnosed someone with advanced liver disease, they wanted better data. So they ran their own fiber scan. And the result came back dramatically different. Not stage 3, the early stages of stage 2. Still a little concerning, still something that they had to address, but not the same story that I had been told weeks ago. And for the first time since this journey began, I felt a little hope. Not certainty, but hope, because those two things are not the same. I stayed on the medication. I followed the recommendations. I continued trying to improve my diet. Not perfectly, not even close. And if you've ever struggled with food, you know exactly what I mean. People love to talk about discipline as though information automatically changes behavior. It doesn't. My mother was told that she had liver disease, and she still wanted KFC. I was told that I might have advanced liver disease and still found myself struggling with the same habits I'd been struggling with for years. That's not weakness. That's being human. Several months later, the hepatologist repeated the fiber scan, and this time, the results improved again, stage 1. Now, think about what happened so far. I'm told I'm stage 3, then stage 2, then now stage 1. At that point, I was beginning to believe that this story was heading towards a positive ending. And even then, everything would change again, because that's when the MRE entered the picture. And suddenly, I found myself right back where I started at. Now, for those of you that aren't familiar with it, an MRE is a specialized MRI that measures liver stiffness. It's considered the gold standard. It's a sophisticated imaging tool. It can provide valuable information. The test itself wasn't the problem. The problem was what happened next. The results came back. And according to the radiologist's interpretation, stage 4. Not stage 1 anymore, not stage 2, stage 4. Think about that for a second. A few months earlier, I'd been told I was stage 3. Then another specialist told me I was stage 2, and then stage 1. And now a different doctor, a radiologist, is saying that I'm stage 4. At some point, I just stopped worrying about my liver and started wondering if anybody actually knew what was happening, because none of it made sense. This disease doesn't normally go backward and forward like the stock market. People don't typically go from stage 1 to stage 4 in a matter of months. It takes years. Something just wasn't adding up. This was the moment when confusion turned into frustration, and eventually frustration turned into anger. Not because I wanted good news, but because I wanted an explanation. I remember asking my doctor a simple question. I wanted to know, what is your clinical assessment? Not the radiologist's assessment, not the report. I want yours. And as the physician treating me, what do you believe is happening? And I couldn't get a direct answer out of him. Finally, after enough conversation, enough questions, persistence, the doctor told me something that completely changed how I viewed the situation. He said that if he was going to give me his own clinical assessment, he would stage me at 1. Stage 1. But he wasn't willing to override the radiologist's interpretation for coding purposes. I remember just sitting there thinking, how can both things be true? You can't be stage 1 and stage 4. How can the doctor treating me believe one thing while the official diagnosis says something completely different? That was the moment that I needed another opinion. Not because I thought I knew more than the doctors, because the doctors didn't agree with each other. And when experts disagree, that's not the end of the conversation. That's the beginning of a deeper one. So I made an appointment with the Mayo Clinic. Now, if you've ever sought a second opinion, you know that there's a strange mix of emotion that comes with it. Part of you hopes that they're telling you everything is fine. Part of you worries they'll confirm your worst fears. I carried both emotions into that appointment. The hepatologist reviewed everything. The original fiber scan, the repeat fiber scans, my blood work over the past year, the ultrasound, the MRE imaging, the clinical history, everything. And after reviewing the records, he told me something I'll never forget. He said, I don't believe that you have advanced liver disease. Now, he wasn't ready to give me that as a final opinion yet. He wanted Mayo's radiologist to review the MRE independently. But based off everything he had seen so far, he was not seeing a picture that suggested advanced fibrosis. So for the first time in a long time, I felt somebody was looking at the entire story instead of one chapter. And a week later, the review came back. Mayo's radiologist concluded that the interpretation suggesting stage 4 fibrosis was not consistent with the overall picture. Their explanation was that the original interpretation from my first radiologist appeared to focus on a very small portion of the liver rather than the overall average stiffness. When Mayo looked at the complete study, they believed the findings were much more consistent with someone with little to no fibrosis, just a mild fatty liver. They also noted concerns about the quality of the imaging itself and recommended repeating the study in the future using Mayo's own protocols. Now, I want to be very careful there. Mayo did not tell me to ignore my health. They did not tell me to stop caring about my liver. They did not tell me to go celebrate with a cheeseburger and forget everything I've learned. What they told me was that the evidence did not support the conclusion that I had been living with. And that's a different statement. And honestly, it changed everything. Not because suddenly I believed I was invincible, because I finally understood something that applies far beyond medicine. Experts are human. Even good experts, well-trained experts, highly educated experts, experts who genuinely care about helping people. They're human, which means they can disagree, they can interpret information differently, they can emphasize different data points, and occasionally they can be wrong. That's not criticism, it's reality. Around the same time, something else happened that reinforced this lesson for me. A younger cousin of mine, she received a frightening diagnosis of her own. She had been told by a radiologist back in San Diego that she had stage 4 liver disease. When she shared what was happening, I encouraged her to seek another opinion from the hepatologist who had cared for my mom in her last days. She did, and the conclusion was entirely different. The issue wasn't advanced liver disease at all. He ultimately diagnosed her with celiac disease. Different problem, different treatment, different future. And again, the story being told by the evidence didn't match the original conclusion. Two different people, two different situations, same lesson. Keep asking questions. Now, somewhere in this story, faith enters this conversation because faith always enters my life. When I was first told that I had stage 3 liver disease, I prayed. And when the answer stopped making sense, I prayed. And when I was waiting for Mayo, I prayed. I don't say that because prayer magically removes fear. It doesn't. I was still scared. I still had questions. I still worried about my future. But prayer gave me something else. It gave me peace while I waited for the answers. And today, sitting here, I can absolutely tell you that I am at peace. Not because every question has been answered. Mayo still wants their own imaging. That appointment is scheduled at the end of this September. But because I trust whatever comes out next, God's already there. Whether you call that faith, providence, grace, or simply hope, it's carried me through more than one difficult season. And this was no different. So what's the lesson? It wasn't doctors are wrong. It isn't that you should ignore diagnoses. And it certainly isn't that Google knows more than medical school. The lesson is that nobody has more at stake in your future than you do. When I was told I had stage liver disease, I started treatment. I took it seriously, I listened, and I followed directions. But I also kept asking questions. When the story stopped making sense, I didn't stop thinking. I sought additional expertise. I reviewed the evidence. I advocated for myself. And that's a lesson that applies everywhere. In your health, in your finances, in your career, in your marriage, in your faith. Respect expertise. Learn from the people who know more than you. Listen carefully because you're the one who has to live with the consequences. Before I let you go, I want to leave you with a simple question. Where in your life have you accepted an answer that doesn't completely make sense to you? Maybe it's medical, maybe it isn't. What's the question you've been afraid to ask because you assumed someone else knew better? Think about it, because sometimes the answer that changes your future isn't the first one you receive. It's the one you keep searching for. Do me a favor and share your thoughts in the comments. I'm Mario. This is Unfinished. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next episode.